Watched the film, honestly. I can't say what it was. It's definitely different places where I could have got my eyes in better spots and got to the progressions quicker and regardless of anything, so all those sacks, they definitely on me.
Understand in a situation like that, when it comes to the 3s and 4s that you're playing with that aren't going to be on the squad and not going to make the team, give your quarterback a chance. Okay, you know what? You know they can't hold up that long? Let's play quick game. Let's play quick game just to get Shedeur in the goddamn rhythm. But no, you come out, calling regular offensive plays.
When they're at practice, Shedeur Sanders is not their priority. When he is at practice, he was staying hours beforehand, leaving hours later.
And I'm going to answer this question by saying Shedeur Sanders. And I'm going to tell you why. I think he's being set up to fail.
They're at practice. Shedeur Sanders is not their priority. When he is at practice, he was staying hours beforehand, leaving hours later.
With all of our players, Mary Kay, there's things that we can do better, and there's some good moments out there, but that's what our job as coaches, to develop our guys.
You just beat the guy. And that's okay. You get paid, he gets paid. Sometimes Ocho just gonna win because Ocho was just the better player. Sometimes the defensive back is gonna win. He wins some, you win more than you lose. Right.
I'm outraged, I'm sickened, and I'm saddened. By the way, Shedeur continues to be treated in the National Football League now by those sorry-ass Browns and sorry-ass Kevin Stefanski.
What if I told you that one of the most promising quarterbacks in recent memory was deliberately set up to fail on national television? That everything you witnessed during Shedeur Sanders' preseason struggles wasn't just bad luck or rookie mistakes, but part of a calculated system designed to crush his dreams before they could take flight? I'm about to expose the shocking truth behind what really happened to Shedeur Sanders with the Cleveland Browns, and by the end of this video, you'll understand why some of the biggest names in sports media are calling this one of the most disgraceful examples of sabotage in modern NFL history. This isn't just about football, this is about a young man's future being manipulated by people who should have been protecting it. I'm outraged. I'm sickened. And I'm saddened by the way Shedeur Sanders continues to be treated in the National Football League, specifically by those sorry Browns and their coaching staff under Kevin Stefanski. What you're about to discover will fundamentally change how you view not just this situation but the entire system that's supposed to develop young talent in professional sports. We're going to break down exactly how this setup unfolded, from the moment Shedeur stepped onto that practice field to the calculated decisions that put him in impossible situations during game time. You'll hear from major analysts like Stephen A. Smith, Skip Bayless, and others who saw this coming from miles away. Most importantly, you'll understand why this pattern of treatment represents something much bigger and more troubling than just one quarterback's bad day. By the time we're done, you'll have all the evidence you need to see this situation for what it really is, and why it matters for every young athlete trying to make it in professional sports. Here's where this story gets absolutely infuriating, and I need you to pay close attention because what I'm about to reveal shows just how calculated this entire situation really was. When Shedeur Sanders walked into that Browns facility, he wasn't walking into an opportunity, he was walking into a trap that had been carefully constructed to ensure his failure. Let me paint you the complete picture of how this systematic sabotage unfolded. From day one, Shedeur Sanders was never treated as a legitimate prospect with potential. Instead, he was relegated to working exclusively with third and fourth string players, guys who everyone in that building knew weren't going to make the final roster. Think about the psychology of this for a moment. You're asking a quarterback to develop timing, chemistry, and rhythm with players who won't even be on the team in a few weeks. It's like asking someone to learn to dance with partners who are going to disappear before the performance. But here's what makes this even more sinister: Shedeur wasn't just showing up and going through the motions. According to multiple reports, including insights from Garrett Bush, this young man was arriving hours before practice started and staying hours after everyone else had gone home. He was putting in the extra work, studying film, working on his mechanics, doing everything a dedicated professional should do. Yet despite this extraordinary commitment, he was never given meaningful reps with the first-team offense. Now, let's talk about what happened when game time arrived, because this is where the setup becomes undeniably obvious. When they finally put Shedeur into that preseason game, they didn't adjust the playbook to account for the fact that he'd been working with inferior talent all week. They didn't call quick developing plays that would give him a better chance to succeed with an offensive line that couldn't protect him. Instead, they ran the exact same offensive schemes they would run with their starting unit, knowing full well that the players around Shedeur couldn't execute at that level. This is coaching malpractice at its finest. Any competent coaching staff understands that when you're working with backup and practice squad players, you have to adjust your approach. You call quicker routes. You design plays that get the ball out of the quarterback's hands faster. You create situations where success is actually possible. But Kevin Stefanski and his staff did none of that. They threw Shedeur into the deep end with concrete blocks tied to his ankles and then acted surprised when he struggled to swim. The most damning part of all this? When questioned about these decisions, Stefanski showed no accountability whatsoever. He stood there with a straight face and claimed that his job was to develop rookies while simultaneously doing everything possible to prevent that development from actually happening. It's like a teacher claiming they want to help students succeed while deliberately giving them tests on material they were never taught. The hypocrisy is staggering, and it reveals the true nature of what was happening behind the scenes in Cleveland. Now, you might be thinking, maybe I'm reading too much into this situation. Maybe it really was just bad luck or poor performance. But here's the thing, some of the most respected voices in sports media saw this setup coming from a mile away, and their analysis proves that what happened to Shedeur Sanders was no accident. Stephen A. Smith, who has decades of experience covering the NFL and has seen every type of situation imaginable, called this entire preseason scenario a setup from the very beginning. He didn't wait until after the games to make this assessment. He predicted it before the first snap was ever taken. Smith looked at how the Browns were handling Shedeur's preparation and immediately recognized the pattern. He stated unequivocally that the goal was to make Shedeur fail, to reinforce the narrative that he was just a fifth-round quarterback who didn't belong at the professional level. Think about the significance of Smith making this prediction beforehand. This isn't Monday morning quarterbacking. This is a seasoned analyst recognizing a deliberate strategy in real time. Smith understood that by starting Shedeur in the opening preseason game without proper preparation or support, the Browns were essentially throwing him to the wolves and then planning to point to the inevitable struggles as proof that their initial assessment was correct. Skip Bayless took this analysis even further, calling the Browns' treatment of Shedeur Sanders the worst possible approach and identifying it as part of a troubling pattern. Bayless emphasized that this wasn't an isolated incident of poor coaching. It was a systematic approach designed to undermine a young player's confidence and development. He pointed out that the way the Browns handled this situation only added unnecessary pressure to an already challenging transition to professional football. But perhaps the most insightful analysis came from commentator Ocho Cinco, who made a point that should resonate with anyone who understands football at a fundamental level. He argued that if you had placed Tom Brady, arguably the greatest quarterback of all time, in the exact same situation with the same supporting cast of players who weren't going to make the roster, even Brady would have struggled. This observation cuts right to the heart of the matter. Football is the ultimate team sport, and no quarterback, regardless of talent level, can succeed when surrounded by inadequate protection and unreliable receivers. Ocho Cinco also predicted something that's already starting to come true, that critics would use Shedeur's preseason struggles to label him as a failure and dismiss him as nothing more than a fifth-string quarterback. But as Ocho pointed out, these same critics would conveniently ignore the circumstances that led to those struggles. They would focus on the results while completely disregarding the process that produced those results. What makes these expert analyses so powerful is that they're coming from people who have no personal stake in Shedeur Sanders' success or failure. These are seasoned professionals who have covered thousands of games and seen countless young players enter the league. When multiple experts independently reach the same conclusion about systematic sabotage, it's time to pay attention to what they're saying. Here's what absolutely blows my mind about this entire situation, and it's something that reveals more about Shedeur Sanders' character than any touchdown pass or perfect spiral ever could. Despite being thrown into an impossible situation, despite being set up for failure by the very people who were supposed to be developing him, despite having every legitimate reason to point fingers and assign blame where it belonged, Shedeur Sanders took the high road in a way that would make any parent proud. When the media approached him after those difficult preseason performances, Shedeur didn't make excuses. He didn't throw his coaches under the bus. He didn't complain about the lack of support from his offensive line or the drops from receivers who wouldn't even make the practice squad. Instead, he looked directly into those cameras and took full responsibility for every single sack, every missed opportunity, every moment where the offense failed to move the ball effectively. Listen to his exact words. "I got to watch the film. Honestly, I can't say what it was. It's definitely different places where I could have got my eyes in better spots and got to the progressions quicker and regardless of anything, you know. So, all those sacks, they definitely on me. This is a 21-year-old kid who just got thrown to the wolves, and his response is to analyze his own performance and figure out how he can improve. That's not just maturity, that's the mindset of a true professional." But here's what makes this response even more remarkable. Shedeur knew exactly what was happening to him. He's not naive. He understood that he was being set up in a difficult situation with limited support. Yet he chose to focus on the only thing he could actually control, his own preparation, his own decision-making, his own development as a player. Instead of wasting energy on things outside his influence, he channeled that energy into getting better. This kind of response reveals something crucial about Shedeur's character that goes far beyond his ability to throw a football. It shows mental toughness, emotional intelligence, and a level of self-awareness that many veteran players never develop. He demonstrated that he understands the difference between making excuses and taking ownership, between being a victim and being accountable for his own growth. However, and this is a critical point, there's a limit to how long any person should be expected to shoulder blame for circumstances beyond their control. While Shedeur's mature response is admirable, it also raises uncomfortable questions about the system he's operating within. How long should a young athlete be expected to take responsibility for the failures of coaches and organizations? How many times should someone have to prove themselves in situations designed for failure before they're given a legitimate opportunity to succeed? The fact that Shedeur continues to handle this situation with such grace and professionalism only makes the treatment he's receiving more inexcusable. Here's a young man doing everything right, working harder than anyone else, taking responsibility for outcomes beyond his control, maintaining a positive attitude despite obvious obstacles, and yet the system continues to work against him rather than with him. Now, here's where this story becomes about something much bigger than just one quarterback's preseason struggles, and why everyone who cares about fairness in sports needs to pay attention to what's happening here. What we're witnessing with Shedeur Sanders isn't an isolated incident. It's a symptom of deeper systemic issues that plague professional sports, particularly when it comes to how young athletes are evaluated, developed, and given opportunities to succeed. The treatment of Shedeur Sanders exposes a troubling pattern that extends far beyond the Cleveland Browns organization. Too often in professional sports, we see young athletes, particularly those who don't fit certain predetermined molds or narratives, being placed in situations where failure is not just possible, but probable. These athletes are then judged based on their performance in these compromised circumstances, with little to no consideration given to the factors that contributed to their struggles. Think about the broader implications of this approach. When organizations systematically undermine young talent through inadequate preparation, insufficient support, and unrealistic expectations, they're not just hurting individual players, they're damaging the integrity of the entire evaluation process. How can we accurately assess a player's potential when they're never given a legitimate opportunity to demonstrate their abilities under fair conditions? This pattern is particularly concerning when we consider the long-term effects on these young athletes. Professional sports careers are incredibly short, and opportunities at the highest level are extremely limited. When organizations waste these precious opportunities by setting players up for failure rather than success, they're potentially derailing careers before they ever have a chance to begin. The psychological impact of this treatment can be devastating, creating doubt and insecurity that may persist long after the immediate situation has passed. What makes the Shedeur Sanders situation even more troubling is the way it reflects broader issues of bias and prejudgment in professional sports. There's a disturbing tendency to write off certain players before they've even had a chance to prove themselves, often based on factors that have nothing to do with their actual ability or potential. These preconceived notions then become self-fulfilling prophecies, as organizations create circumstances that confirm their initial biases. The financial implications of this systematic mismanagement are also staggering. Professional sports organizations invest millions of dollars in scouting, drafting, and developing young talent. When they then sabotage that investment through poor coaching decisions and inadequate support systems, they're essentially throwing money away while simultaneously destroying human potential. It's a lose-lose situation that benefits no one except those who profit from maintaining the status quo. Perhaps most importantly, this situation highlights the need for accountability at the organizational level. When coaches and front office executives make decisions that clearly undermine player development, there should be consequences. The fact that Kevin Stefanski can stand in front of reporters and claim to be focused on developing rookies while simultaneously doing everything possible to prevent that development shows a level of disconnect that should be unacceptable in professional sports. The Shedeur Sanders story is ultimately about more than football. It's about fairness, opportunity, and the responsibility that organizations have to the young people whose dreams and futures they hold in their hands. So here we are, having exposed the systematic sabotage that Shedeur Sanders faced with the Cleveland Browns, and I want you to think about what this really means. We've seen how a promising young quarterback was deliberately placed in impossible situations, how respected analysts predicted this setup from the beginning, how Shedeur responded with remarkable maturity and professionalism, and how this situation reflects much deeper problems in professional sports. The evidence is overwhelming. Shedeur Sanders wasn't given a fair opportunity to succeed. Instead, he was used as a pawn in a larger game designed to confirm pre-existing biases and protect organizational narratives. The fact that he handled this treatment with such grace and accountability only makes the situation more inexcusable. But here's what gives me hope. By exposing these patterns and holding organizations accountable for their treatment of young athletes, we can start to create change. When fans, media, and analysts refuse to accept these systematic injustices, it puts pressure on organizations to do better. Shedeur Sanders' story doesn't have to end with this preseason debacle. It can be the beginning of a larger conversation about fairness and opportunity in professional sports. The question now is whether the NFL and its teams will learn from this situation or continue to repeat the same destructive patterns. Will they start giving young athletes legitimate opportunities to succeed, or will they keep setting them up for failure? The answer to that question will determine not just Shedeur Sanders' future, but the future of countless other young athletes who deserve better than what they're currently receiving. I want to hear from you in the comments below. Do you think Shedeur Sanders is being treated fairly, or is there a deeper issue at play here? How long should young athletes be expected to take responsibility for circumstances completely beyond their control? And what do you think needs to change in professional sports to ensure that talented players get legitimate opportunities to prove themselves? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and I want to know where you stand on this issue. If this video opened your eyes to what's really happening behind the scenes in professional sports, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our upcoming deep dives into other situations where young athletes are being failed by the systems that should be supporting them. And if you want to see more content exposing the truth behind what really happens in professional sports, check out the video I've linked on screen right now, where we break down another shocking example of systematic bias in the NFL. Trust me, you won't believe what we uncovered there either.